Have you ever asked yourself why we grieve? Most of us don't know what grief is about. I know for me personally, I didn't really know much about grief. I didn't know how to handle grief. I certainly didn't know how to get through it until I was thrust into grief. And I think that happens for a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why I make why I made this channel and why I do these videos is because the way that I have come to resolve and work through my grief, my perspective is different. And it certainly has changed in the last 12 years. But when we ask the question, why do we grieve? We think, well, it's because we lost someone. We had something and we lost it. And so grief is the result of that loss. We had expectations for a future that are no longer available to us. We had plans that are now thwarted. Yes, those are all reasons why we grieve. But I think when I look at it, I think that grieving is the way that we show our love. It's the way we process what's happened. And it's a way for us to honor the person that we've lost and a way to say goodbye, at least to the physical world. So Earl Groman has a very famous quote that says, grief is the price we pay for love. Grief is the price we pay for love. And I think it's true because I always have said that the more you love someone, the deeper your grief is going to be. Whether it be, loss of a child, loss of a spouse, loss of a parent, these are all very strong emotional bonds that you have with people. And when they leave you and when something happens, of course, grief is the response. But so many times we associate grief and grieving with the suffering because it's painful, because we're sad, because feelings of anger and guilt and depression and betrayal all come up. And we think of these emotions as negative emotions. And I've done another video that says, do you think you deserve to suffer? Do we deserve to suffer? And is the reason why we grieve because we are supposed to suffer? And I say, no, I don't think that's it at all. That's not what I've come to after 12 years of thinking about grief, after all of the years of talking to all of you and answering questions and all of the people that I've supported. No, it's not about suffering. And sometimes we need to be reminded of that, particularly when we're deep in it. And here's a question. Have you ever thought about what if you just didn't grieve? What would your life be like if you lost someone tomorrow and you didn't feel anything and there wasn't any grief? There was no grief response. There was no sadness. There was no pain. There was no frustration. What would that be like? And would that make it better? It's a question I just have for you. But here's the thing. The reason why I think we grieve is because it's a reminder of how much we loved. And our grieving should be something that we do to honor the person that we've lost. I talked to so many people and me included, I did the same thing. I hung on to my pain and I didn't want to let my pain go because after a while, after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years, you start to associate the love that you have for the person that you've lost with the pain. And you start to think, well, if I let go of that pain, I'm letting go of that person. Maybe I'm betraying them because I'm forgetting about them, because I'm moving forward, I'm moving on. And so I'm not going to give up to that pain. And I have so many people that I've talked to, this is why we stay stuck. And there's some people who just choose to avoid grief altogether. If you're here watching this video, it's probably not you. Or maybe you did for a while and now you figured out that doesn't work. Avoidance of grief does not work. So it's a process that we absolutely have to go through as part of the human condition. So you can't avoid it. But here's the thing is that we get so focused on the pain. We get so focused on the depression and the anger and everything that we're going through. And we get stuck in how hard it is. And why does this happen to me? And why did I lose my loved one? But here's the thing, the reason why we grieve is because grief is a natural reaction to loss of love. Of course you're grieving. It's a symbol of the love that you had for the person and how much they meant for you. And if it didn't have so much meaning, you wouldn't need to spend a year or 2 or 3 or however long it takes to process what actually happened. There's that period in the beginning of grief where you're numb and you can't even I can't even believe that this has happened. I haven't really grappled with it yet. I haven't really accepted that they're gone and I got to figure this grief thing out. But over time, you do come to the acceptance that they're gone, and then you have to figure out how to live. And so why do we grieve? For me, I say the reason why we grieve is because we need to say goodbye. We need to process what happened. We need to remember how much we love them, and we need to honor them with the life that we still have. I always say that grief is not about the death of your loved one. Grief is about figuring out how to live without them. Good, bad, or indifferent. And so I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I asked her, and she had never thought of this, and I want to pose this to you. If you've been grieving for a long time, if you've been hanging on to the pain, if you can't figure out how to move forward, my question to you is, what would your loved ones say to you? Would they want you to stay stuck in grief? Would they want you to stay in the pain? Would they want you to not move on? Would they not want you to love again if it's a spouse that you've lost? If it's a child, would your child not want you to be happy again? I think not. So I want you to take a moment today and think about, what would your loved one, if they could talk to you, if they could say something back to you about your grief and what you're going through, what would they say to you? And let that sink in. And take your time to grieve. I'm not telling you not to grieve. Take your time to grieve. But remember that grief is the process of getting through it so that you can be happy again, because you deserve to be happy again. That's what your loved one would want. That's what the result is of grief. That is why we grieve. It's to be happy again and to figure out what that means to you for your life. And how are you going to continue to live this life that you still have left? If you stop living, you're dishonoring them. Honor them by continuing to live. Honor them by continuing to learn and grow and help other people through their grief once you get through it. That's why we grieve. Not to suffer, not because we're supposed to hurt. We grieve because we love. We grieve because we want to process what has happened, because that relationship was so meaningful, no matter how long or short it was. And it's a way to say goodbye. And use your grief to figure out how to move forward, how to be happy again, because that's what you deserve. So please watch this video 1 or more times. Come back to it if you need to. You need to be reminded that grief is not about the pain. Grief is figuring out how to be happy again, and you absolutely can, and you deserve to. Have a great day today.